Welcome, everybody, to our Tactical Tuesday for this week. We have an exciting topic that we're going to be talking about, and that is analyzing properties the right way. And guys, we see so many investors that tend to skip over this section, tend to think, well, I bought a few properties already. I know how to do this. This one will work. And maybe don't dial in the numbers like they really should. And so tonight, whether you're a newbie, whether you're looking to buy your first investment property, or whether you've bought several, it's kind of irrelevant. This is a step that we got to make sure that we aren't skipping. And so tonight we're going to, well, let me show you. We're going to go through this form here. This is a property analyzer form, guys. And a link will be thrown in the comments if you want to download one for yourself. It's absolutely free. Just our link for that will be thrown in the chat. And download one. You can walk through the whole process with us. We're going to fill it out together tonight. And we're going to go over some of the points that are on this property analyzer that are really, really important. Things that we cannot skip over that we see a lot of people doing. We're going to talk about three major mistakes that a lot of real estate investors also make when it comes to analyzing a property. And hopefully you are not one of those real estate investors that makes these mistakes. I'll be honest with you. We were a real estate investor that made these mistakes. And so that's why I know that they're common. And of course, dealing with thousands of investors over the last 20 years, we have seen a slew of different types of mistakes that get made, and there's some that are more common than others. So we're going to talk about the top three that we see and how they will affect you. So if you're looking to buy a property at some point, let's say in the next year, then this training tonight is going to be beneficial because we're going to walk through all the steps that you need to do to analyze and make sure you're buying something that is going to be beneficial, bring you closer to your why, bring you closer to your dreams and goals, and help you live that investor life that we're talking about all the time. So thanks for saying hi as you come on, everybody. I see from Thornhill, Heather, and Westport, Ontario, our turkeys, all the way from Cape Breton and Vancouver and St. Albert and Montreal and Kitchener, Waterloo, Panorama, BC, Kelmar, all the way from Kelmar. That's not too far from us. Welcome, Giovanni. So good to see you guys. All right. So tonight, guys, how do we do it the right way? That's our topic. But we're going to start off with three major mistakes that we see real estate investors making. Mistake number one, guys, and this is the one that you obviously don't want to be making when it comes to buying an investment property, is underestimating your expenses. Okay, that seems kind of obvious. But second to that, underestimating your total purchase costs. Okay, and I'm going to get into greater detail about what that means when we run through the property analyzer form. But when we run through that form, you're going to see what I'm talking about. A lot of times, let's say, I'm going to give you an example. Let's say we're buying a $500,000 property. A lot of people think, okay, well, I need $100,000 to buy that. But there's a lot of other costs that we might not think about that we need to factor into that equation to help us figure out whether that specific property is going to work for us or not. What is our ROI going to be? How much money are we actually going to have to put in to buy that property other than just the down payment? Because there's a lot of other costs that come along with buying a property. So mistake number one, guys. And by the way, I'm looking at the chat. Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for saying hello and saying where you're from. And if you are one of our members here within Fearless or on YouTube that is here for the first time, or maybe you've been here several times and you have not had the guts to comment yet, throw it in the chat. Ask questions tonight. That's what this is all about, guys. The reason we are here is to make sure that you, as real estate investors, buy the right stuff, that you get closer to your why, that you accomplish your goals. That's the whole point of real estate investment, or else why are we here? So we want to make sure that you do it right the first time. And so that's why we're talking about this tonight. How to analyze a property the right way. So mistake number one, I'm going to repeat it: underestimating expenses. So that's monthly expenses, that sort of thing. and underestimating our total purchase costs. That's what we see happen a lot. And again, when we go through this property analyzer form, I'm going to talk about that in a little more detail. Mistake number 2, guys, I'm going to get to these right away, and then we're going to dive into this analyzer. Overestimating our income and our rents. Again, it seems totally obvious. But sometimes what happens when we're trying to make a property work is we think, well, I'm going to get $2,000 a month rent when really we might only get $1,800 a month rent, but I'm going to put on the form $2,000 because I want to make this work. We start fudging the numbers a little bit just so it looks a little bit better to ourselves, maybe so that it looks better to our bank, maybe so that it looks better to our investors. This is a mistake we don't want to make. Okay, because that $200 a month could make the difference between cash flow positive and cash flow negative in that example. And so again, we're going to dive into this a little deeper once we dive into this analyzer form here. So number 1, underestimating expenses and total purchase costs. Mistake number 2, overestimating income and rents. Mistake number 3, not planning an exit strategy up front. Okay, so let that sink in a bit here. A lot of times we buy a property thinking, okay, I'm buying it because it's going to give me X amount of dollars of cash flow. Or we think, I'm buying it because I'm going to renovate it, I'm going to change its use, and then it's going to be worth X amount of dollars more, and then I'll sell it. Or we might think, well, I'm going to buy it and renovate it and flip it, or I'm going to buy it and flip it to myself, or we're going to do all of these different strategies, but we're not quite sure. We're just kind of going to wing it and see what happens, see where the market takes us. And don't get me wrong, sometimes we have to change our plan, but do we have a defined plan going in? Okay, so not planning an exit strategy at the very beginning is a big mistake that a lot of investors make. And you're going to see on our property analyzer form, one of the questions on there is, what is our exit strategy for this property? Is it something we're going to keep a long term? Do we know who we will be selling it to at some point down the road? Maybe this is a property we're going to keep forever. What is our plan? It'd be good to know that up front. So yes, lots of, I see that Jules a few minutes ago put in the link. If you want to download your own property analyzer worksheet, it's absolutely free. You just put in your email and it gets sent to you immediately. And you will have this analyzer, and you can, it's actually fillable, guys. So online, you're going to see, we're going to walk through this in a minute, and we're going to fill it out together. And it's really, really handy to keep with you and to use over and over again. There we go. The link is in there again, Jules. Thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome everybody. And you know what? As we go through this, guys, if you notice that maybe I enter a wrong number, maybe I'll do that on purpose. Or maybe I'm not analyzing it quite properly. I want you to pay attention and make sure that I'm doing things right. And if you notice something, throw it in the chat. If you have questions as we're going through this property analyzer, why do we have that expense on there? Or why aren't we considering this? Or what is that question for? Whatever your questions might be, throw it in the chat, okay? And I'll try to address all the questions as we go through this material tonight, because this is fundamental when it comes to making sure that the properties we buy get us closer to our goals. What we don't want you as investors to do is go out and buy a property just to buy a property, or go out and buy a property because somebody said that it was a good investment property. We want you to take the fear out of real estate investing, and we want you to be confident in the properties that you're going to buy. Okay, so, and confident based on the analysis that you've done, the research that you've done, so that you know, and of course, nothing is 100% predictable, but you know where this investment is going and the plan for it right from the beginning. Okay, so here we go, guys. We are going to dive into our property analyzer form. If you haven't downloaded one yet, the link is in the chat. You can just go grab it there and you will have it within seconds. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to go over this form together. So this is our property analyzer, guys. This is the one you can download for free on our website, investorlife.com, or use the link that is in the chat that Jules has been sharing with everybody here. So let's go through this, guys. Let's go through this. When we go through a property analyzer, one of the first things, one of the first mistakes that I see people making is that they don't fill it out 100%. Fill out every single one. Every single one of the fillable spots here is there for a reason, guys. Okay, so later on down the road, for example, we know what address we're analyzing. So let's call this 123 Lovely Street. Okay, and this is in Anywhere province in Canada. Okay, there we go. Today, March 7th, 2023. And the property we're going to look at is going to be valued at approximately 500,000. Okay, so let's say no, we're not going to value it. That's the asking price. It's on MLS. Okay, we're looking on MLS and we see the asking price is 500,000. Now let me come back here. We might be saying, well, I don't have any properties in my area that are worth 500,000. That's way too low. Or we might be saying, well, that's much higher than I can afford to purchase. Or that's what we're trying to do here, guys, is just kind of give you an example. And the whole point of analyzing properties is to be able to compare one property versus another property versus another property. It's much more about comparing properties than it is about analyzing one specific property. Once we have a few to compare to each other, that's when we can start to make an educated decision on which is the best one to buy. So we might look at a property in British Columbia and look at the numbers and analyze it. Then we might look at one in Saskatchewan. Then we might look at one out in the East Coast. And then once we do that, we start comparing, okay, well, look at how different the numbers are one way or the other. Which one of these properties is best to invest in? And this is how we start to make educated decisions, is by comparing properties. So it's not as much about just analyzing one, it's about comparing many. Okay, I hope that point sinks in a little bit. So let's get back to this property analyzer here, and we're gonna start to fill it out in more detail. So one of the first areas I'd get you to do is scroll down to our purchase details area. So this is, of course, where we put in, they're asking 500,000. Let's assume we are also going to pay $500,000. Let's assume that we're not going to be able to get anything less than that. We're going to put 20% down because that's what most investors are doing. That makes our mortgage $400,000 at 20% down. And let's use, for today's example, let's use an interest rate of 6%. Okay, that's what our mortgage broker has told us already that we're going to be able to get on this property, 6% on a particular mortgage. And our amortization, we're going to get a 30-year amortization. Now, the next thing you're going to notice here, guys, is what is the mortgage payment? How do we figure this out? Where do we go to figure out our mortgage payment? Let me show you. An easy place to save in your bookmarks, guys, is the mortgage calculator at investorlife.com. So save this in your favorites. You come to our website, investorlife.com, you go to your toolkit, and you use the mortgage calculator. It's as simple as that. We put in the number here of 400,000. That's our mortgage amount. Our amortization of 30 years. We're going to pay monthly, and our interest rate we chose was 6%. Okay, there we go. We have our mortgage payment. Very, very simple. There's a payment chart to show how your balance gets paid, blah, 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 as you go down here. But the point of this, guys, is very simply, we have our amount, $23.79. So let's now go back to our monthly mortgage payment. We're going to put $23.80 is what our amount is. $23.80 was our mortgage payment. Okay, and our down payment, obviously, on this is $100,000, guys. 20% down, $500,000 purchase price. We're putting down $100,000. So that's step number one. We filled out our purchase details. Now, this is assuming that we are not negotiating the price. Maybe we'll get it for $495. Maybe we'll get it for $485 or $490, something like that. But let's just assume, based on what they're asking, does this property fit? Yes or no? And of course, if we are able to negotiate lower, we would change these numbers and keep it in our file. But let's go back to this. So now, what other closing costs? And this goes back to mistake number one that we talked about earlier, guys, that people make is they underestimate the total purchase costs. So it's not just $100,000 here in the down payment, but there's other costs involved. So this particular property, I'll make it a little bigger for you. This particular property, let's say on average, our legal costs to close on a property in Canada are somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. Okay, so let's just use $1,500 as an example. What other closing costs might we have? Well, there's always other little things that you might run into that we have to be aware of that we weren't expecting. They just pop up one way or the other. Maybe we need to get keys made. Maybe we need to hire somebody to go and clean it. Maybe we need to do this or that. So let's just throw in $1,000 just to be on the safe side. And you're going to notice, guys, as we go through this, we want to be on the safe side when it comes to analyzing a property. So this particular property, we decided we need to do a small paint job. We're going to change some of the lighting fixtures and some of the door handles. And we're planning on spending $5,000 on this particular property. It happens to be in Alberta, so there's no land transfer tax. We're going to get an appraisal done, which is roughly about $400. Guys, if you don't know the number of what it costs to get an appraisal, then ask your mortgage broker. Make sure that you ask appraisal companies, phone around, get what is an appraisal cost in my neck of the woods. We're going to get an inspection done on this property, and I'm going to throw in another $400. It could be $5, it could be $6, it could be $250. Again, which company you're going to use, ask them how much this is going to cost. Here's another section, guys, that we do not want to miss, and this is our reserve fund. So that means that, let's say we bought this property, and on day one, month one, we do not have a tenant. We're vacant for the entire month. Well, who's going to pay for that? It needs to be accounted for at some point. What if we're vacant for 2 months? What if in month 2 our furnace goes down or our hot water tank? Or these are the types of things that a reserve fund is for, those unexpected costs that do come up when we buy properties that we're not expecting. Okay, so we usually suggest somewhere between 2 and 3 months of gross rent. That's what we would suggest. So in this example, I'm going to use roughly 2 months of gross rent, and we're going to put $7,500 aside in a reserve fund in case something goes wrong. We have a couple spots to write in some other costs here. What are some other costs we might have? Well, guys, I know a lot of you are investing afar. And in investing afar, maybe that means that you need to travel to go see this property. Maybe you are going to travel there to help out with the renovations or organize the contractors. Well, maybe that's an extra expense that we need to account for when it comes to doing our analysis. It might be different on one property that's close to us. It might be more expensive for a property that's on the other side of the country. So these are numbers that we want to try to figure out ahead of time. Let's throw in $2,000 for travel because it's a little ways from us. What other expenses might we have? Well, maybe we have to set up a company to qualify for this property. Maybe we have to be booking some appointments with our accountant. We're already paying for legal costs. We want to get our accountant involved. We want their opinion. Let's throw in some accounting fees here just because that may happen. And to be on the safe side, I want to account for $1,500 for that. I'm just giving you an example, guys. It's not that you have to pay for these things every single time, but when we're doing an analysis, we want to throw in all other purchase costs that may come up. For example, one that is quite common is the homeowner or the person we're buying it from has paid the taxes for that entire year already. And we are buying it from them before that year is up. We have to reimburse them for the taxes that they've paid for the months that they don't own it anymore. And now we own it. So that's a cost that sometimes can be several thousands of dollars that we need to pay our lawyer in order to close on the property. These are the types of closing costs that we need to be aware of and put within our analysis upfront if we can. And of course, sometimes there's going to be extras that we can come up with, but that's why we're trying to get as close to that as possible. That's why we're throwing in reserve funds. That's why we're throwing in other closing costs. We're trying to overestimate what some of our expenses are going to be. Okay. So now, when we look at this property, guys, what do we actually need to close on it? We don't need 100,000. We need 117.8. We might need somewhere near 120,000. It's a 20% increase from what we may have thought at the very beginning. That is going to have an effect on our return on investment. That is going to have an effect on how well this property actually performs based on the money we put in, our ROI. So we want to know what these things are up front. So for example, if we bought the same property, but it didn't need $5,000 in repairs, well, now we're putting less money in. We're putting in zero, and we're only putting in 114,000. Now our return on investment could be significantly higher. So this is where comparing property 1 to property 2 to property 3 can make a big difference. But let's throw that back in. Okay, 5,000. Oops, did I hit enter? This is up to 119.3 now. There we go. Okay, so now, guys, what we then go to, once we've figured out our purchase details, once we've figured out our purchase costs, we go to our monthly analysis. And this is kind of where most people start. But what we want to do is figure out our actual purchase costs first. Then we go to our monthly analysis. So our monthly cash flow breakdown. Now, let's say that this particular property has an up suite and it's rented for $2,000 a month. Okay, it also has a basement suite or a lower suite, and we're going to get $1,400 a month from that. And it happens to have maybe a garage, and we're going to get $300 a month for that. Let's say our total income on this property is $3,700. Where do we get these numbers? Well, we want to be talking to our property manager. We want to be researching what similar type properties rent for in that particular neighborhood, city, province. We want to know these things before we start putting in offers on properties. That's why we're doing it at the analysis section of this, guys. Okay, so now we do our expense breakdown. We throw in our mortgage payment here, which was down below $2,380. We already figured that out. So let's throw that in. And our MLS sheet or our realtor, or we can look it up on our city website. We can usually figure out what the taxes are going to be on a property. This particular one is roughly about $3,500 a month. So we're going to use a number of $292 for taxes per month. These are monthly, remember. Insurance on this type of property is about $150 a month. Tenant's going to pay the utilities, so we can leave this section blank. Property management. Now here's a section of this analysis form that we need to really think about is, are we going to be managing it or are we hiring a property manager? Now, I would say across Canada, this industry standard is somewhere between 10 and 12% of your gross rent is what property managers cost. I know that there's some that do 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 and some that charge more than 12, but on average, you're roughly about 10 to 12% of your gross rent. And that's kind of how property managers are paid. Obviously, the more rent they get, the more money they make. So it's an incentive for them to rent it out at a higher price. So let's use a number of, in this particular case, we'll use a number of 10% just to make it easy. And that makes our property management cost $238 a month. Repairs and maintenance, we're already going to be putting $5,000 of repairs in. It's a newer home. Let's say this one is going to be a little bit lower. We're going to use a number of 5%. These numbers vary, guys, depending on how old the house is, how much actually deferred maintenance might be in this property. We will up this to 10% or higher, or lower it to 1 or 2% if it's brand new. These are the numbers that we can play around with based on the property, this specific property. So now then when we go to compare this specific one to another specific one, and maybe the repairs are less, or maybe they're more because it's older and might need more, this is where we start comparing one property to the next. Vacancy rates we can get from our town, city, CMHC, all of those different areas. We can talk to our property managers. What is the likelihood? How many? Maybe we have a portfolio already. What is our current vacancy rate? You can get these numbers from your real estate board. All these different areas. We want to kind of be a little bit. We want to do our diligence when it comes to what potential vacancy could be. I'm going to use a number of 5% just for this illustration. Okay, good. So there we go. We have total expenses of this particular property. You might throw in the other section, you might throw in a condo fees. If it's a condo, you might throw in other different expenses if you have them. That's where you use this other tab here. Excuse me. Okay, so in this particular case here, guys, does this property cash flow? Throw it in the chat and let me know what you think. Does this property cash flow? And if so, how much does it cash flow by? Well, we're $3,700 in income. We're $3,294 in expenses. So what are we at? We're at $406 for our cash flow. Here we're taking into account a number of things. Our mortgage, taxes, insurance. These guys here, these three numbers are the most important numbers when it comes to figuring out. Yes, Eric, you got it, 406, awesome. These are our hard costs. No matter what, we have to make this mortgage payment. No matter what, we have to pay the taxes. No matter what, we have to pay insurance, okay? Property management, we might pay this number to ourselves. Repairs and maintenance, we might not have repairs and maintenance that particular month. We might not have it for 6 months, but then we have a $600 bill. So this is something we want to keep accumulating in our bank account. Same with the vacancy. We might not have a vacancy. We put in a tenant where we maybe buy a property with a tenant already in it. And our first year, we have no vacancy. But once that year is up, maybe we go 2 months of vacancy. So that's why we let this number accumulate in our bank account. So these numbers technically are also being thrown in our bank account, especially if we are managing the property ourselves. So this property could potentially be throwing somewhere around the $900 a month into our bank account. But we're not going to go and spend that $900 a month because we're keeping a large portion of it there to account for our vacancy, our repairs and maintenance, and our property management. Hopefully that makes sense, guys. And of course, a reminder, throw any questions you have in the chat, guys, okay? Jules, I see that you threw in the chat too our link for the mortgage calculator. Yeah, you just go to our website and you click on Toolkit and a mortgage calculator sits there. But we're not done the analysis here, guys, okay? This $500,000 property, it cash flows. Are there properties like this in Canada right now in our climate? Yes, there are. I have seen in the last month properties as low as $100,000 that cash flow in certain markets in this country. I've seen people cash flow with properties that are well over $2 million and higher in this country right now. The purpose of this analysis is to help us find those properties, to make sure that we are doing it the right way and we are calculating this correctly. But we're not done this sheet yet, guys. And remember at the beginning, I said, make sure that you fill out every single part of this because there's reasons for that. And so I'm going to go over that right now. And the bottom section of this analysis asks us a question here. What is the market growth estimate per year? So remember, if we're comparing property A to property B to property C, they might be in different markets. And this number could have a dramatic effect on which property we end up purchasing. So for example, if property A cash flows $406 a month, but is in a market that is estimated to go down 2% this year, and maybe we have another property that cash flows only $250 a month, but is in a market that is expected to go up 6% this year, which one would you buy? Do you see the value of comparing one to another, and then to another, and then to another? It's the importance of property analysis is not just analyzing one property and saying, okay, well, this is a buy. The purpose of analyzing a property is to look at it and compare it to other properties that you could consider at that time. Okay. So let's assume that this property here goes up in a market. I wouldn't, unless it's cash flowing dramatically, I wouldn't suggest purchasing in a market that is going down in value. Now, there can be reasons why you would do that. Don't get me wrong. But in most cases, and especially if you're a newbie and this is your first purchase, you want to be purchasing in a market that is at least staying level, it's stable, or has potential for one reason or another to go up. So let's change that to 2%. Look at the next question on this sheet, guys. It's an important one. Who will manage this property? Now, maybe at first we might say, well, that'll be me. But if this is a property that we're throwing some travel expenses into, and it's somewhere else in the country, maybe it's a property manager we're hiring. Do we know who that is yet? Have we interviewed potential property managers yet? Is there a purpose in analyzing this property if we don't even know who would manage it? No. And so this is a reason why we would rely on our realtor. We would rely on our own diligence in finding a property manager in that particular market, because we could have a market that cash flows $1,000 a month and a 10% market growth. But if we don't have somebody to manage it, how is that going to work out for us? It's an important question. So let's say this one is relatively close by and we plan to manage it. Okay. Can I find a partner who will invest with me on this property? We're going to come back to that question. How long do I plan to hold this property? Well, this particular one seems to cash flow well. Our plan for this one is to hold it for at least 5 to 7 years. And it's more of a long-term buy and hold. So we'll write that in there. Okay. What is my exit strategy? Remember, we talked about this. This was our mistake number 3 that a lot of people make, is they don't plan an exit strategy up front. And the reason we say to do it up front, guys, is because I'm going to give you a couple examples. Let's say we buy a property that is a single-family home, and it's very near a university, it's very near a school of some sort, and our plan is to change it into a student rental of some sort. We're gonna make suites out of each of the bedrooms in this house. We're gonna have 8 to 10 suites. We're gonna increase our income. We're gonna double, triple, quadruple our income, because we're not just renting one family. We're gonna rent to students. Maybe that's our plan, and it's gonna cost us X amount of dollars to do that. Now, when the time comes to go and sell that property, how are we gonna be selling it? What is our exit strategy? Well, in that particular case, we would not be selling it to a single family that would be buying it to live in. We are more likely to be selling it to an investor that would buy it. Now, if that's our exit strategy and we're only going to be able to sell it to investors, the pool of potential buyers is significantly less than if we opened it up to the entire market. So that's why we need to have a planned out exit strategy at the very beginning, because we may not be able to sell it for as much as we had hoped to. Now, maybe the school is doing amazing and student rentals are in real need, and maybe the value goes up, and maybe we do really, really well. Absolutely, that can happen. But plan your exit strategy based on who you're going to sell to and how big of a market you have to sell to at that particular time. Hopefully that makes sense. Before we move on, I am going to, so let's just fill this part out. What is my exit strategy? We are going to buy and hold and hopefully sell, or I already wrote in buy and hold. We're going to sell to open market, hopefully a homeowner, because we're going to stage it well. We're going to, bake some bread and make it smell good. We're going to get the maximum amount for the sale on this particular property. Okay. Now, where are we? What would I grade this purchase out of 10? Well, we're going to come back to that as well. Two questions we're going to come back to. Can I find a partner? And what would I grade this? If you have to hold this property, this is an important question, guys. If you have to hold this property long term, maybe initially we're analyzing this based on flipping it. Maybe initially we're analyzing this based on I'm going to change its use and then sell it, or whatever the case might be. What if we can't sell it? What if we buy this property and our plan was to assign it to somebody and we can't assign it? Or we buy a new build in a condo building, for example, and we go to sell, well, everybody else is trying to sell at the same time. If you have to hold this property long term, does it still work? We want to answer that question. This last question we're going to come back to as well. So before we fill out the rest of our estimations and questions, guys, we're going to go up to the top and fill out a very important section of this property analyzation sheet. And that is the top 5 reasons why you would buy this property. Now, here's a mistake number 4 we're going to bring out today that I see a lot of investors making when it comes to analyzing a property. And that is they don't fill out this section. So I asked them, what are the top 3 or the top 5 reasons? Tell me why you are considering to buy this property. Some of the answers that I get are, well, it's a good deal. Or, well, I'm getting it under market value. Or, well, I just thought that it's nice and close to me, and so I can manage it. It's going to be easy to manage. Or, well, it's a house down the street, and I've always wanted to own 2 of them on the same street. I can go on and on with all of the different reasons why somebody might want to buy a property. But this section of this analyzer is so important. I call this the which means section. Which means. And I'm going to tell you and explain to you what that means, okay? This is the which means section of the property analyzer. Why would I buy this particular property? I'm going to give you some reasons why you should be looking to buy properties. Here's one. The neighborhood, is under transition and prices are climbing. Okay. Notice, which means higher property appreciation. Maybe that's one of the top 5 reasons why I'm considering this property, because there's a lot of other properties being torn down, new builds going up. Maybe there's the area is in transition. It's changing. Restaurants are coming there. It's going from what it was to something new, place where people want to hang out, a place where people want to live. What are some other reasons why? And you're going to see what I mean by which means. You see, I'm going to highlight that there. I can't highlight it. There we go. Which means. We always want to fill out why it means something. Here's another example. There is a new freeway exit and entrance being built within a 5-minute drive, which means it's closer to lots of high paying jobs. You notice again there, guys, we want to not only put the benefit, we want to make sure that we are clear why that benefit is good for us as an investor. What's another reason? It is all fully renovated. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not renovated at all and it gives us a chance to renovate it. But for this example, it is all fully renovated, which means repairs, maintenance will be lower. Boy, my typing isn't that great. There we go. Which means, okay, what's another reason? Oh, this property happens to be across from a school, across the street from a school. Which means, boy, oh boy, which means it will attract families, which is our favorite tenant demographic. Okay, these are all reasons why we might buy a property. Location has a lot to do with it. The property itself, whether it's renovated or not, whatever our reasons might be, guys, this is what we want to pay attention to. Okay, what's another reason? Well, the property is bright and spacious. So it will be easy to rent out, which means lower vacancy. All right, we filled out our top 5 reasons on this particular property. These again are just examples, guys, okay, just examples. But we want to be clear as to why we're considering it. If we can't fill out 5 reasons why we would buy this property, I'm going to venture to guess that it's probably not a property we should be considering to buy. Okay, so if you're struggling to find 5 reasons why to buy it, move on. Complete the analyzer, save it in your file, but it's probably not a property you should buy. These should be clear. And my suggestion to you is when you're filling it out, make sure that you are using this term in every one of these reasons. What the reason is and what that means for you as an investor. And here's the reason, one of the reasons why that's important. We're going to go back down to the bottom. Can I find a partner who will invest with me on this property? A lot of the reasons as to why we might be able to find a partner or not come back to these reasons here, the top 5. Remember, if a partner is going to invest with us and give us their money, and that's our plan, we need to be clear on what those reasons are as to why they would invest with us. Because they're going to ask us these questions. So we need to be clear up front as to the reasons why we're considering to buy it. That's the value of having to force ourselves to fill it out here on this analyzer. We can always just refer back to it. This is why I consider this property to be a good one or a bad one. So let's assume in this one, yes, there's lots of good reasons why. We kind of went through those already. How would I grade this purchase out of 10? Well, that is kind of dependent on comparing this one to another property and then comparing it to another property and another property. And the more that we analyze, the more that we go through this process, the clearer we're going to get. So we might start off with this one. Well, this looks to me like an 8 out of 10. But by the time we start comparing it to other properties that are out there as investment opportunities, we might start changing this number around a little bit. Okay, so just be aware of that. And the last question is an important one, guys, is all emotions aside, is this a good purchase? So again, that comes down to comparing it with other ones. You know, I would say from what we have seen so far, this property cash flows. There's really good reasons why we might buy it. It happens to be on Lovely Street, which is amazing. Um, the purchase costs make sense. Our ROI is going to be not too bad because we're not dumping a ton of money into it other than the down payment. There's lots of reasons, especially if my whole point in this is a long-term buy and hold, and I'm going to sell at the end to a homeowner. All of these factors included, I would say, yeah, this is probably a good purchase. But remember the fact, guys, is that we want to make sure that we're comparing this property to other ones. So when we are analyzing properties, we do not want to just fill out one form. We want to fill out several forms, several property analyzer sheets, and then we put them all on our desk side by side by side, and that's when we make a decision as to which property we're going to purchase. Okay, I hope that makes sense, guys. We ran through the property analyzer sheet and gave you some reasons as to why some of these numbers are important. We want you to fill it out the right way. We want you to fill out everything on the sheet because every single one of those questions is super, super important. Now, I'm going to go through some of the questions here in the chat. Is this market growth of the value of the property or an estimate of rent increase? So I'm not sure who asked that question, but this would be the market growth of the property. So what you're expecting that particular market to increase by over, let's say, in this case, 5 to 7 years, because I'm planning to hold it for that long. Karina, how long are you okay with driving for showings to? Driving? So, Tiff has a lot of good YouTube videos and stuff on hiring property assistants, which becomes very, very valuable when it comes to doing that. So we don't do our driving much anymore, but, I would say no more than 45 minutes or so. You might stretch it up to about an hour. We have done that, but I don't know that I would want to drive much more than that. Although we also have a lot of videos on how to maximize our showings so that we're not having to do a lot of that driving as well. So maybe those can be put in the chat here at some point. Jules will find that stuff. Okay, so I know she's smirking right now, probably. Okay, so is there a minimum monthly cash flow you would consider since it can fluctuate based on expenses? Very, very good question. I'm not sure who put this one in. Is there a monthly minimum cash flow? So that is very property dependent. If I have a $100,000 property, am I okay with a cash flow of $200 a month? Yes, I am. If it's a $1 million property, am I okay with a cash flow of $200 a month? Probably not, because those expenses can fluctuate much more and have a much more dramatic effect based on interest rates or taxes going up, because they're all based on property value. So you're going to have a variance. There's no specific number that might fit every single property. But, all in all, if I have 10%, $100,000 property, and I get $100 a month, that's not 10%, is it? But there's no minimum monthly cash flow. It's very property specific. That's how I would answer that question. What else do we have here? When does it make sense to borrow against your existing home equity to fund a purchase? So it can absolutely make sense to borrow against your home equity. That can give you the down payment that you might need to go then and buy a property. But if you're going to borrow, and here's the key that you would want to throw in your property analyzer, is that, let me go back to that. Actually, that's a really good question. One of the things that we would want to do then, and let's say we're pulling out 100,000, this 100,000 is coming from the home equity we might have, and it's not cash. Well, we're going to have a monthly payment to borrow that money. Either our mortgage is going to go up, our mortgage payment for our principal residence, or what might happen is, let's say we get a line of credit or something like that, and we're going to have an interest cost on that. So we want to make sure that in our expenses, that is also covered. So let's say we have an interest only. Let's say we borrowed on a line of credit, LOC, and I don't know what that would cost for 100,000. We'd have to figure that out. Let's say it's at 6% now. That's $6,000 in a year. Divided by 12 months is $500 a month. If we add that in now, well, that changes our monthly cash flow here to minus 94. Okay. So that's where we need to start analyzing, where is this money coming from? What is the cost to borrow that money? And we want to make sure that this property that we buy can cover that cost. Hopefully that makes sense. We don't want to have to out of pocket that cost. Okay, good question. Now let's go back. What other questions do we have here? Love the reasons sections. Yes, absolutely. And honestly, guys, there's a lot of people when they are filling out this form, they skip this section here. Why would you buy this property? They just skip it. They leave it blank. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to have the reasons why you would buy it. Because some properties you're going to have one or two. Some properties you might have 10. That helps you to analyze it. That's the purpose of going through a property analyzer. It's not all about the numbers. There's a lot more involved. And of course, these questions down here are super, super important as well. Yeah, 45 minutes. That's true, Nicole. Doesn't get you far. Yeah. Well, there we go, guys. Your questions have been answered. We've gone through the property analyzer. Just to recap, fill it out fully. Okay, Jules will throw it in the chat one more time. If you don't have a copy of it yet, use it, guys. If you forget where to get it, you don't want to come back to this chat, just go to investorlife.com, go into our toolbox. You can get a copy of this property analyzer there. That's where our mortgage calculator lives as well. There's lots of tools there, guys, that you can take advantage of that are absolutely free. And we want you to make sure that you guys are doing this correctly. You're doing it right. That's why we created this group, and that's why we do these trainings. So there we go. The link is in the chat. Thank you, Jules. And happy analyzing, everybody. And remember, if there was one thing that you're going to take from this, sorry, two things. Fill it out completely. Number one. Number two, make sure that you are comparing properties. You don't just fill it out with one property and say, yeah, I'm good to go, without comparing against others. That's the purpose of this property analyzer, to compare one property versus another. Awesome. There we go, guys. Thanks for joining us this week. Next week, we have a special guest coming on, and we're going to be talking about mix. And you guys might know Lori May. She's going to be joining us next week. Tiff is going to be interviewing her. So we're looking forward to that. So join us again next week. And just so everybody knows, you hear us talk a lot about our Ignited members and our Ignited program. We are holding on Monday, March 27th, we are holding a information session on our Ignited program. So if you've kind of been on the fence about what is that all about, I want to know more, we're going to do a behind the scenes. We're going to jump in, show you our membership site. We're going to show you all the content that lives there. We're going to explain a little bit about our program, how it works. And we're going to also be offering a one-time discount, which is actually the lowest price we have ever had for Ignited. We're changing a few things around. It's going to be a great opportunity. So if you've been on the fence at some point to, should I join? Is it worth it? Join us for that event. Just go to our website, guys, and the link to register for that information session, March 27th, 7 p.m. Eastern, is on our website. So we hope to see you there. That's it for now, March 27th, Jules. And I will just share my screen again and just show you guys where you can go if you're interested in joining us. Just go to our website, investorlife.com, click start here, and that brings you down to where our Ignited information session is, and you can register for free. You'll be in, you'll get the reminders, you'll get the login code, and we will see you on Zoom, and we will walk you through behind the scenes of our Ignited program. All right, guys. So thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Take care.